Elaine Donovan was the perfect priest's wife until a secret love affair with another woman shattered her quiet life and set in motion a murder that would shock the entire town. What began as whispered glances ended in blood, betrayal, and the darkest kind of hypocrisy hiding behind holy vows. Father Michael Donovan was the kind of man people trusted instantly. His warm smile, steady voice, and calm presence made him a pillar of the community. People often said that he made faith feel comforting, not condemning. He wasn't just a priest, he was a counselor, a mentor, and sometimes even a stand-in father for those in the town who didn't have one. His sermons were always full of hope, love, and second chances. He spoke of forgiveness and family, of God's endless mercy. To anyone who knew him, Michael seemed untouchable, someone guided by divine purpose. But very few people understood how complicated his life really was. Michael was part of a breakaway sect of Catholicism that allowed priests to marry, a choice that made him controversial but respected in his parish. His marriage to Elaine was seen as a symbol of faith evolving with the times. They were the modern holy couple, balancing love for each other with their shared devotion to God's work. Together, they ran charity events, visited sick church members, and hosted dinners at their modest home. To everyone around them, they were living proof that love and religion could walk hand in hand. But beneath that perfect surface, the truth was much darker. Elaine Donovan was a woman who had given up more than anyone knew. She had dreams once, before marrying Michael. She wanted to travel, study literature, maybe even write books. But with Michael's calling came expectations, sacrifices, and isolation. Over the years, her bright, curious spirit was worn down by the never-ending obligations of church life. She became the priest's wife, a role she hadn't truly chosen but felt too guilty to abandon. The quiet evenings in their house were not filled with conversation and laughter, but silence, strained politeness, and the weight of unspoken things. What hurt Elaine the most wasn't Michael's coldness. It was that he never truly saw her. To him, she was part of the picture he painted for the world, a supportive wife who existed to make him look complete. While he stood in the pulpit preaching love, Elaine sat in the pews feeling more alone than ever before. That loneliness had become a dull ache, something she accepted as normal until the day she met Rachel Harper. The meeting was accidental, but life-changing. Rachel was new to town, standing at the edge of the local library's reading room with her wild red curls and a stack of books on philosophy and poetry. There was something about Rachel that drew Elaine in immediately, not just her appearance, but the way she carried herself, like someone who had nothing to hide. In contrast to Elaine's careful, controlled existence, Rachel was bold, funny, and alive. It started with casual conversations about books, but quickly those conversations turned into something deeper. Shared glances, long pauses, laughter that felt too intimate for friends. For the first time in years, Elaine felt seen, not as the priest's wife, not as someone's charity partner, just as herself. She hadn't planned to fall in love, especially not with a woman, especially not here, but the feeling was undeniable. What started as small sparks soon became a burning fire she couldn't ignore. And in that moment, the life she had been living, a life of duty, control, and pretending, began to crack apart, piece by piece. Elaine's entire world shifted the more time she spent with Rachel. It began innocently enough. Quiet lunches at a corner cafe, long walks through town gardens, afternoons spent talking about things Elaine hadn't allowed herself to think about in years. With Rachel, she didn't have to pretend. She could laugh at inappropriate jokes, speak her mind without filtering every word, and admit things she never dared say aloud. What scared her most wasn't that she was falling in love with a woman. It was how natural it felt, like breathing after holding it for far too long. Rachel had lived openly for years. She wasn't reckless about it, but she wasn't hiding either. Her family knew. Her friends knew. But she also understood the dangers of loving someone trapped in a world of appearances, especially in a small town that judged anyone who stepped outside the lines. Elaine's hesitation made sense to Rachel. She didn't push, but the chemistry between them made it impossible to ignore. Every moment they shared was electric, filled with the thrilling risk of discovery and the aching sweetness of something real. For Elaine, the duality was suffocating. During the day, she smiled politely at church members, planned community fundraisers, and played the role of the loving priest's wife. But at night, her mind drifted to Rachel, the warmth of her hand, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about things she loved, the slight tilt of her head when she listened closely. Elaine found herself sneaking away more often, using errands and charity work as excuses to meet Rachel in places where no one from the congregation would see them. Their secret affair carried a dangerous beauty, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong move could send everything crashing down, and that fear made it all the more exciting. The secrecy was intoxicating, even though Elaine knew it couldn't last. They talked about escaping, about starting over somewhere new where no one knew her name or her story. Rachel painted pictures of city apartments, open evenings full of music and art, and a life built on honesty, not shame. Elaine wanted it so badly she could taste it. But something always held her back. It wasn't just fear of scandal. It was fear of who she would become if she left everything behind. The weight of her life with Michael wasn't just about marriage. It was about duty, identity, and faith. If she left, who would she be? And could she live with the fallout her decision would cause, not just for herself, but for the man she'd promised to stand beside in good times and in bad? Despite the risks, the love between them only deepened. Their meetings grew riskier. Elaine no longer cared if a neighbor saw them talking in the park or sitting too close in a coffee shop. She was done hiding. But in small towns, secrets have a way of leaking out, whispered from one curious mouth to another like a slow, spreading stain. It wasn't long before the rumors started. And once those whispers reached the wrong ears, nothing would ever be the same again. Michael Donovan had always prided himself on control. Control over his congregation, his reputation, his household, and most importantly, himself. For years, that control had been his armor. It kept him steady when others faltered, gave him strength when life pressed down, and shielded him from emotions he didn't want to face. So when the rumors first started, small, sharp murmurs about his wife spending time with another woman, he dismissed them. Gossip was common in small towns, and Michael was used to protecting Elaine's dignity by ignoring cruel talk. But denial only works for so long. The whispers grew louder. Looks lingered longer. Church members hesitated when speaking to him, their words careful, their smiles forced. Michael tried to convince himself it was paranoia until the day he found the phone. It was hidden in Elaine's sewing basket, a small, old device not connected to their home account. Michael hadn't been looking for it. He had been searching for thread to fix a frayed shirt. But once he found it, he knew immediately what it meant. His hands trembled as he scrolled through text after text. They weren't just friendly messages. They were love letters, confessions of passion, explicit promises of a new life far away from him and everything they had built together. Reading those words made something inside Michael collapse. His perfect life, his carefully curated image of stability and righteousness, was a lie. And worse, it was being undone not by another man, but by a woman. In Michael's mind, it wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation, a sin layered upon another sin. He imagined the church elders shaking their heads, the congregation whispering behind his back, his sermons laughed at behind closed doors. To him, this wasn't just Elaine's shame, it was his. But Michael didn't shout. He didn't confront Elaine that night. He didn't even mention what he found. The anger he felt wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, sharp, and deliberate. That was the kind of man he was. Calm on the outside, calculating on the inside. Instead of confrontation, he watched. He paid attention to when Elaine left the house, the excuses she gave, the small tells in her behavior that she probably thought went unnoticed. Over time, he began following her. At first, it was distant, parked down the street while she met Rachel. Eventually, it became closer, walking past them with his head low, memorizing Rachel's face, the way they touched each other when they thought no one was watching. As Michael's fury grew, it twisted into something dark, something that convinced him this wasn't just personal, it was spiritual warfare. He saw himself as a soldier of God defending his household from corruption, from sin, wearing the mask of love. His prayers at night weren't soft invocations of mercy anymore. They were sharp, focused, vengeful. He asked for strength, for courage, for justice, and slowly those prayers turned into plans that would soon tear everything apart. The summer air was thick and heavy the night everything fell apart. Elaine had been restless for weeks, the weight of living two lives pressing harder each day. Rachel had been pushing for them to finally leave, to break free from the suffocating world Elaine was trapped in. After all the whispered plans, secret embraces, and stolen time, the decision had been made. They would run. Elaine didn't care anymore about the fallout. Reputation, marriage, all of it felt like a prison she was desperate to escape. Freedom wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was close enough to touch. They chose a secluded park on the outskirts of town as their meeting place. It was late, nearly midnight, the streets empty, the world asleep. Elaine parked her car beneath a cluster of trees, her heart pounding in her chest, half from excitement, half from fear. Rachel was already there, waiting in the shadows, her familiar smile cutting through the dark. For a brief moment, all the weight disappeared. It was just them. Two women in love, ready to leave everything behind for a chance at something real. But they weren't alone. Michael had followed Elaine from the house, staying far enough behind to remain unseen, but close enough to watch every turn she made. He didn't bring a gun or any loud weapon. What he carried was personal. A hunting knife taken from the church's old storage, sharpened earlier that afternoon with slow, deliberate care. To Michael, this wasn't murder. This was cleansing, purification. In his mind, this was God's justice made real by his own hand. As Elaine rushed into Rachel's arms, unaware of anything around them, Michael moved through the trees with silent, practiced steps. The betrayal felt physical, like a sickness crawling up from his stomach. The woman he had vowed to protect, the wife he had built his life around, was wrapped in the arms of another, whispering love meant only for him. When he struck, it happened so fast that neither of them even screamed at first. The first blow landed in Rachel's back, sudden and brutal. The shock in her eyes was immediate, her body collapsing forward against Elaine. The second and third strikes were wild, fueled not by precision, but by rage that had been building for weeks, months, years. Elaine tried to pull Rachel away, her hands slick with blood, her voice breaking with horror. But Michael didn't stop. He couldn't stop. His whole world had narrowed to that single act of violence. Rachel fell to the ground, her breath short, desperate, fading. The dark earth beneath them drank the blood like a silent witness. Elaine screamed then, finally finding her voice. But it was a scream of helplessness, not rescue. It was over. Michael stood above them, chest heaving, face pale but steady. In his mind, he had done what needed to be done. The judgment had been passed, the sin punished. And in that silent, broken park, love turned to tragedy in an instant. Michael didn't run. After the blood cooled on his hands and the shaking in his legs settled, he simply walked away from the scene, leaving Rachel's broken body behind in the dirt. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He walked along the edge of the highway, his clothes stained with dark streaks, his lips moving as he recited pieces of scripture, one after the other, like broken fragments of an old prayer he barely understood anymore. When the police cruiser pulled up beside him 2 hours later, the officers were stunned by how calm he appeared, as if he'd just returned from Sunday service instead of leaving a fresh crime scene behind. The investigation was swift. Elaine's call to 911 had come moments after the attack. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, her words frantic and broken. She tried to explain, but it was all chaos. Her lover bleeding out in her arms, her husband disappearing into the night, the weight of 1,000 secrets crashing down all at once. By the time the officers found Michael, they already knew what had happened. His calmness made it worse, not better. There was no denial, no excuse, just scripture in cold, steady eyes. News of the murder exploded through the town like wildfire. The headline alone was enough to ignite shock across the entire state. Priest kills wife's lesbian lover in grisly attack. The church board, once fiercely supportive of Michael,